Welcome back to the podcast. It has been over 2 years. Did I just ghost you for 2 years and pretend like nothing happened? I did. And I'm not going to feel any type of way about it because I've been so consistent on my Instagram and on my TikTok and starting to be more consistent on other platforms. But the podcast, I don't know what it is. I think it is just high barrier to entry. And for me, I have a lot of things I want to do, and unfortunately, not a lot of time in terms of if I had infinite time, I would be doing all of these things. So, a bit taking time or taking myself back to 2023. This is how I launched my consulting company was through a podcast, and this launched in August of 2023. I think I did 5 episodes, which surprisingly over the years has actually continued to bring in new people into my life, into my world, and like the most magical people have been finding me from podcasts, and this is why I'm starting to get a little bit more into podcasting and YouTube because it's reminded me like, oh yes, these are very high value and have a lot of equity inside of the assets that you produce in terms of content on these platforms versus short form content, which for Instagram and TikTok has a shorter lifespan. So here we are. I fed ChatGPT my call transcripts from the past 2 years and was like, what are the top 10 questions that my clients have across my mastermind, my agency, and also my one-on-one clients? And it gave me 10, which I was like, okay, we can work with this. So I'm just gonna hit record. I was going to do these live, but I thought, hey, it's 1:22 a.m. Don't ask me why I'm up at 1:22 a.m., but I'm gonna do these live. And I'm going to do these first, sorry, as a podcast. And then I'm going to do them live if I can catch it at the right time. If not, I can just stream these live. So that's fine. So I actually wanted to first touch on, before we get into it, a little bit of housekeeping. You're probably going to find this content elsewhere, but for you to actually get the most out of what you're listening to today, because I don't want you to just listen to this and intellectualize it, because if you're anything like me, you're going to like to collect information and education like it's nobody's business. You probably have like 10 audiobooks in your audio. You probably have 10 audiobooks in your wish list alone, right? In Audible. And you probably also have a Spotify subscription that allows you to download like free audiobooks, and you've probably got a good zillion in there. So for you to get the most out of your time today, actually, I'm going to timestamp the specific questions that I'm going to cover, and I want you to ask yourself before we get into it, what is the question? What are the one or two questions that I need right now to in order to solve my most immediate bottleneck? And if that's none of these questions, please do not listen to this, because whilst I am all for consuming content, guys, there's so much content out there, and I have been on the other end of just being completely overwhelmed with, okay, what do I do with all of this content? Because now like AI is even spitting out content. So I need you to be really discerning with what content you're consuming and if it's going to be adding to your mental load, right? I love that we're here. I love that we get to spend time together, and I love that I'm in your ears or you're watching me on your screen. But if it's not going to move you forward and it's just going to give you that cheap dopamine of feeling like you've done something, put this video down, put this podcast down, and go and do something inside of your business, inside of your life that's actually going to make you proud. And then if you want, you can come over to my Instagram. You can let me know, say, hey, Yana, I did this today, and I will be there to cheer you on and to say, I'm so proud of you. And if watching this video is actually one of those things, that is fine as well. But I just want to make it so clear. If this doesn't help you right now, just check in with yourself. That's all I'm going to say. All right, let's jump right into the very first question. Let me ask you a question. This is not a question. This is the very first problem. My mind was thinking question. Anyway, so let me ask you this question. Would you rather 100 people asking you for your freebies or 10 people DMing you and asking you questions about your specific subject matter? So whatever you're an expert in, let's say for me, marketing, finance, business, Or for you, like I've got some clients who are in the education niche, so they might be asking about upcoming exams, study hacks, tutorials, or like specific sort of subject questions. I've got a breathwork client, so you might be asking things like you might get clients who or people in your DMs asking you stuff like, okay, what does breathwork help me do? Or how do I, ensure that I'm doing this properly? This is what I want you to ask yourself. Would you rather 100 people asking you for your freebies or 10 people in your DMs asking you questions? You might be thinking, Yana, why are you asking this? What, like, aren't they for different purposes? And, like, what is the point of this question? I want to ask this because it has become very clear through, the ChatGPT analysis and also just the work that I've done with my clients over the years. People, I find a lot of business owners don't understand the function of a freebie inside of their business. We have been sold just build your list, build your list, build your list, right? In order to grow your business, you want to build your list because you own your list. And yes, there is merit to that. However, if your priority is cash flow, building your list, which is 100 people asking you for your freebies, is not going to be the thing that gets you cash flow. What I would rather you do now, caveat to that, if those 100 people asking for freebies, if they transition into sales conversations, that's a different thing. But most people nowadays just want to, many chat this up, create a document, create something, and then send it to 100 people. I'm going to explain why this is a problem and why I would rather have 10 people asking me questions. So, one, 100 people asking for freebies, this is a lower intent action. So let's think about all the actions that someone can take before they become a customer and even after someone becomes a customer inside of your world. Let's say that each action is either worth a dollar, $10, $100, or $1,000. Which, let's say $1,000 is a sale, $100 would be someone, jumping on a consult call. $10, depending on how you frame the consult call, if it's the first step, actually, or, actually like adding something to cart, coming onto your landing page. So $10, a $10 action would be like a DM, and then let's say a $1 action would be signing up for a freebie. And the reason I'm not actually a fan of 100 of like giving out freebies straight away and building your list is sometimes if your freebies suck, and I'm just going to say this because I've looked at some truly horrendous freebies in my career. If your freebies suck, those 100 people will not likely consume or buy from you ever again. Like that's your one chance at establishing trust and you just poof, gone. So I'm not a big fan of that for that reason. And it's not because your freebie wasn't good or the information wasn't good. A lot of the times it comes down to a lack of clarity in the problem you are solving that people want solved. And this is going to come through reps, which is going to usually come through conversations with your customers. So conversations, when you're in a conversation with a customer, whether it's them asking you a question or them, asking you about your services, you get to discover the context around their life or their or the specific things that are coming up. And if you put on your detective hats, you can figure out what are the underlying problems between where they are right now and where they want to be. And that way you can actually understand how to create a freebie that's going to be beneficial for them in terms of removing one of the blocks that are standing in their way. Most people produce freebies that don't do this and just give them, a lot of advice, but none of it feels like it's solving anything or moving anything forward and often leaves people overwhelmed. And that is why people don't come back because they're like, this did absolutely nothing for me. And they've just associated your brand with someone who doesn't give clear directions and solutions. And what do people pay for? Solutions, guidance. And so someone asking you a question in the DMs generally signals to me higher intent or higher value in terms of, when they're considering asking you a question. Like they're not going to ask just anyone a question. They're going to ask someone they trust can give them a quality answer, especially in the context of sales. So when I ask, would you rather 100 people asking you for your freebies or 10 people asking you questions in the DMs, for majority of you, especially at that 10 to 20K month mark, you want to be having 10 people at all times every single day coming through, at least 10 people asking you questions in the DMs about what you do, how they can work with you, all of that good stuff. And if you don't have that, I wouldn't necessarily backtrack, because most people think, if I don't have 10 people in the DMs, I'm going to put out a freebie. No. No, 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 no. That's like saying, okay, I don't know how to swim, so I'm going to learn, I don't know, something unrelated. Like, I don't know how to swim, but I'm going to learn how to paddle instead. It's like kind of, but not really. Like you can learn how to paddle, but it's not going to help you swim. It might get you to the destination at some point, but let's say you're in a thing where you can only swim. This is a really weird analogy, but you get the point. It's like they're two different skills. So most people backtrack and think, if I get 100 people signing up for my freebies, I'll get 10 people asking me to work with me. But that is not the case, because you probably haven't figured out what is the exact problem that they would be willing to pay for and drop a lot of money to solve, or if you've got a low ticket like that, they would be willing to pay for without having to ask you questions. So that's the first one. If you are promoting a freebie, you want to make sure that it's solving a highly valuable problem. And that leads me to the second thing, which is, Yana, how do I know if I'm giving too much away? Or how do I know, how much I give away in my freebies? And that answer is going to depend on, well, what problem are you solving? Often I like to give them just enough to solve that problem, because what you want people to do is actually solve their problems. And some people might gasp at this and go shock. But if I'm solving their problem in my freebie or in my lead magnet, why are they going to upgrade and work with me? And that's why I'm like, you need to know your value proposition between, whatever your offer is and your freebie, because they're two separate offers, but they should be working in conjunction. One problem solved will always create another problem. And if you think about it, sometimes the problem that you solve with your service or your product is an ongoing problem. So if you can just demonstrate that you can solve that problem once and then help them understand that that problem is going to come back, they're going to come back. This is basically this is the entire basis of the medication industry, right? They sell recurring problems that keep coming back. Just like supplements, exactly like skincare, beauty, all of that stuff. It's stuff that you don't just buy once. That's why people can give out samples of foundation and know that people will still buy the foundation bottle. That freebie should solve a very specific problem or give them the exact thing, experience they're looking for. Help them, answer the questions. Is this going to work for me? How do I know that this is the right thing? And, all of that stuff. Great way to handle any sort of misconceptions or even questions they might have before they buy, and it makes the buying process much easier. But this is going to come from you knowing your customers so well, the exact problem that you solve, the outcomes that they're looking for, and the steps required that they're not taking in order to get there. So going back to where they are now versus where they want to be and all the steps in between. And maybe your freebie solves the first step. We try and give the entire journey, which can work, but as a freebie, if your intent is to then lead them into a sale and get them to apply to work with you, do not give them the whole picture, because they can't do anything with that. It's like, cool, you've basically told me how to cure cancer, but now cure my cancer. That was a extreme example, but I hope you understand. It's like, do you want someone who can say, yeah, theoretically we would do this, which would target, this cell in your body and this treatment, that treatment, or would you want someone who's just like, yeah, I know how to do it. Yeah, and I'm going to take you through it, and this is what you need to do tomorrow, and let us take care of the rest. Right? People pay for certainty. People also pay for speed. People will also pay for experience. But if you can give them certainty, a lot of the times the other things don't matter. And that kind of leads into number 3 problem, which is, if I could recommend to anybody at any stage before selling another offer, before thinking, should I launch another offer? Do I need to, create a new product in order to increase your sales? Before you do that, I want to make sure that your sales messaging is 100% on point with the people that you want to talk to. And here's what I want you to understand as well. When it comes to organic content and building a brand, especially a personal brand, you're going to be talking to a whole ocean of customers, but only a small ocean, a small portion of that ocean is meant to work with you in a specific capacity in that offer. Now, what I also like to think about is with this whole ocean, let's say one offer kind of like fits into this. If this was the entire ocean, one offer might only work with this portion of your audience. You might have another offer that works with this portion, and over time you can move through, and this is how brands evolve and how you can allow yourself and your business to evolve as well, which I love doing because I cannot keep doing the same thing. I think content has been the most consistent thing in my life for the past 5 years in terms of like how I'm running my business and the different things, because I love experimenting. And I love, like, in seasons where I really love one-on-one clients or high touch clients, I'll go fully into that versus like leaning back. So I do like experimenting, but understanding that that's going to target different segments. So a lot of the times people think I've taken this offer as far as it can go because I've hit 10K, 15K, 20K. Maybe that's been the cap for the last 6 months. So it will naturally feel like a ceiling and you'll feel like, okay, maybe I need to bring in another offer. This is where people think, if you've got a high ticket, oh, I just need to bring in a low ticket offer, or I need to bring in a different offer. When a lot of the times, I can 99.99999% of the times, I can guarantee if you just cleaned up your messaging so that you were talking to that pin drop in the ocean of customers that you're specifically serving with this offer, you could easily skyrocket from 20K to 100K to even 200K, depending on what niche you're in per month. And that is in cash collected. So a lot of the times it's not an offer problem. It's just you're not specifically talking to the people in your offer that entire time. You're talking to, some of the times you're talking to people here, which is why you hit that 10 to 20K month mark. But a lot of the times you're talking to people here who are so far away from this offer. And if the problem you want to solve for is I want more people inside this offer, then doesn't it make more sense to create a bigger concentration, a bigger desire, a bigger audience, or bring more attention around the things that these people are going to look for? And a lot of the times we think, okay, if I just expand my ocean, if I just bring more people in, naturally, I'm going to bring more people into this offer, which is great. But this is where we factor in churn, because by the time you bring those extra people in and they go through the sales cycle and they come and buy, let's say, out of every 100, 2 to 3 people buy, that's pretty sort of average marketing numbers. By the time you've done that, maybe 2 clients will have left or finished up or whatever it is. And beyond a referral or a retention problem, this can cause this sort of hamster wheel effect, because you're technically expanding your audience, you're bringing new people in, and new people are signing up to your program or to your offer or whatever it is, but your clients are not staying, or it's at the same rate, so it doesn't feel like it's growing a lot. This is why most people will be plateaued. So instead of thinking, how do I bring more people into my audience, which is what most people will have done, go at it from a different angle. Think, okay, how can I make it so that I make this part of my being inside of my world a lot more attractive? Because there's a likelihood that the people you're bringing in that are only maybe attracted to, let's say, content that you're posting about over here, they're not going to, like, they're probably a few degrees of separation away from caring about this problem, and it's your job in the content to bridge that gap. Because I'm just going to use this classic example. Someone with, let's say, blisters on their foot. Let's say, okay, recently, this is TMI, but this is how we roll. Recently, I had some massive blisters on my foot from running. And before I was into, before I had these blisters, I was looking into different running shoes because I was really into running and I wanted to take running seriously. Now, just because I'm currently experiencing blisters on my foot, it doesn't mean that I'm not interested in running, but it just means that my desire to solve this problem is greater than my desire to run better, because right now this problem is preventing me from running in the first place. And so if someone then created a bridge or a gap where it's like, hey, this is how you can actually run with blisters, or our shoes are designed to help minimize blisters, or whatever it is, and they educate me and help bridge the gap and help me see how that's possible with their product, with their service, with their solution, I'm like, oh my gosh. So even though I was a customer that was theoretically over here, because I've bridged the gap now, I'm going to look at running shoes again. But I don't even know if these shoes exist or if a solution for this exists beyond just letting the blisters heal. So that's a good example of what I mean by sometimes you're just a couple of degrees separation away from, what people initially came into your world for, which, the trending content, the viral content that will bring a lot of eyes onto your page. Your job is to think about how to bridge them and get more people moving along and closing that gap for more people instead of just bringing more people in. And we do this through really targeted positioning. So think about positioning or messaging as a magnet. We think that if we just place a magnet here and place a magnet here and place a magnet here, we're going to attract different groups of people, right? That's what we're doing when we build an audience. We kind of have different groups of people. But when you're selling something, we need to be placing all of our magnets around this thing so that all of these people that came in here, 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 they can come in and are attracted around this problem and at least have awareness. So even if they don't, even that in and of itself creates this desire effect where if a lot of people are paying attention to a certain thing, it's felt, right? It's like why if you see a line outside a store, it creates a sense of demand. You're like, whoa, what is going on there? Like, that must be a good place. And actually, I learned this, my dad was probably, when I look back, like where I learned a lot of these things from just unconsciously. When we first started our cafe business, he had his friends, he like group chatted all of his friends, sent a text out to all of his buddies and say, hey, can you come down on our opening day and just like stand in line? And he gave all of them free food. But one of those, like that day was a very successful day for him, and it was the very first day, and he had a lot of people coming in. And yeah, it created a lot of demand because when there's a line or when there's a tension or a sort of like a magnetic pull towards one thing, naturally we are curious. And therefore, curiosity creates more curiosity. And eventually that will reach people who actually need your product now, tomorrow, next week. And that's why it's really important to have strong messaging versus going, okay, what's another offer that I can sell? If you are going to sell another offer, which I know kind of defeats what I've just said, but if you are going to sell another offer, make sure that it's not different to the messaging here, which a lot of people, let's say, create a low ticket offer and it's completely over here and then go, why is no one buying this offer over here when they've created an offer over like that solves a problem over here. So, but that's tricky because let's say something goes viral and you automatically think, okay, that topic did best. That means that people want that problem solved. But that problem might not be the problem that you solve inside of your core offer. And instead of thinking, how can I then bridge that gap? You go and create an offer here, hoping that they'll see it or understand after, buying a low ticket or whatever it is by creating an offer that solves a problem here, and that's why they're not ascending. That was a little bit extra, but that's what I would think. That's what I would be looking at if I could recommend to anyone before creating a new offer. Think, how can you serve deeper? How can you strengthen your messaging to be more consistent, more clear? No brainer. That leads us into content that attracts ideal clients. And we kind of just touched on this, so I'm just going to quickly skim over this. But no one talks about what actually happens when you go viral. And I'm going to talk about this because I had a few clients. My camera's saying that it's almost dead, but that's all right. Welcome to Yana's life. But I actually had a few clients go viral, and no one talks about what happens afterwards because it can really skew your perception of your business. And here's what I mean. I had one of my clients in the relationship niche. I think, Oh, let me pull it up. It was at least 1 million views in the relationship niche. Um, okay, it's not letting me pull up. That's all right. So at least 1 million views on this video in the relationship niche, but it was talking about breakups. So it was talking about how to get over a breakup. And it was really interesting because then for the entire 4 weeks afterwards, she just started creating content up non-stop about breakups because that was where demand was. Now, this was last year, around the end of last year. She started coming to me and she was like, Yana, I really don't like the clients that I'm working with. Well, she didn't say this, but she was like, okay, I think I want to just create a low ticket offer because there's a lot of clients who, want to know how to get over a breakup, how to get over, heartbreak. And there's demand there, but I don't necessarily want to work with them, and I'm kind of sick of working with them in one-on-one. And she was like, I just don't want to do one-on-ones, which that was when I knew something was off because I was like, but you love one-on-ones. Not that we can't change, but I know she thrives. She was like, I absolutely like it's my favorite thing in the world. And so I was, after a little bit of digging, I realized it was because the people coming into her one-on-one wanted to work with her on breakup stuff when the thing that she was really passionate about was actually getting people, getting females into relationships, into really healthy and thriving relationships so they feel supported and they feel safe to express their needs. And it was more so on expressing their needs and feeling comfortable expressing that versus getting over a breakup. So you can see the clients coming in wanted one thing and she wanted to work on very different things. So she was getting very frustrated, like all they want to do is, work on getting over their ex, making their ex jealous, etc., etc. And I hate that because I don't want to do that. And I was like, well, I took a look at her Instagram and I was like, well, why are you creating content on breakups then? And it's just that's one of those stories where, I'm not saying that this anyone is to blame or, that this is uncommon because it's actually pretty common. But once you get a really big response, like a viral hit, it's natural for you to then go, your attention goes, boom, right? This thing has my attention because it got the highest dopamine response from people, and you can feel the energy because your notifications start going off like ping, 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 ping. Your DMs start going off, your sales, you see a little bit of a spike and or a big spike, and you start seeing all the comments flow through, and all of your senses are going off in your body signaling this is good. And what do we do when we find something that feels good or that we've been told is good? We do more of it. So she started creating more of this content, even though she knew pretty much that she did not want to work with those clients. And I have a very strong philosophy when it comes to this. If you're working in close proximity with someone and you're spending a lot of time with them, you want to be so sure that they're people you want to spend time with. She did not want to be spending time with people going through a breakup. That was still super triggering for her, and she did not want to be doing that. And also, like very different kind of mindsets. One mindset, like that mindset is how can I get back at this person versus the other mindset, which is how can I live for myself. And that's the people she wanted to be around. And spoiler alert, you want to be around your clients. That's how you're going to grow your business. Is being obsessed with the community and the clients that you're working with. Um, and so even though that video might go viral and you might immediately go, I need to do more of this content, I want you to pause and actually sit back and ask yourself, well, are these the types of people that I want to be actually around 24/7? And this is how, actually, I just watched a Vanessa Lau video. It kind of gets away from you because all of a sudden you start following what gives you views, what gives you sales, what gives you this, versus just being like, okay, that video did really well. What are the elements in that did well that I can learn and take over into, bringing clients that I actually want to work with and that I really love, because there's always something you can learn beyond just the topic, because there's probably more than one thing that you did well in that, and it's not just the topic. It's very rarely just one thing. But yeah, stay strong in terms of who you allow yourself to work with. That's why I don't work with a lot of people, and I'm very selective about who I work with in a one-on-one capacity and in like and are super hands-on because I care a lot and I give a lot to my clients. And imagine this was just a relationship where you have where you have one partner caring a lot, giving a lot to the relationship, and the other partner either doesn't care or doesn't appreciate it. Do you think that that relationship is going to be very strong? Like, one, and two, do you think that that partner who's giving a lot is going to feel like they want to stay in the relationship? No. So I want to create a relationship with my business where I love pouring into my business, because there is an element where my business, yes, I'm doing it for others, but it must be fulfilling for me. I refuse to show up inside of my business because I'm just there for a transaction, right? If I wanted to do that, I would actually just have stayed in medicine and become a doctor. But I knew that that was not the path. And for most people, that is the case. That is why I've got friends who've built to 8 figures, 9 figures, and burnt down their business or sold their business, and they were so unhappy because they created it for money. Which, no judgment, and there's nothing wrong with that. But most of us do kind of get to that point where we realize, okay, we don't want that to happen. And yeah, sometimes we don't actually realize that this is why we're attracting unaligned clients, is because we are responding to the thing that's giving the most response for our nervous system to respond to. And so, yeah, that's what I would say is, if you're not creating content that's bringing in your ideal customers, but your content is doing really well, think about what you can learn from what's doing really well and start actually thinking about your messaging, which goes back to the previous question. So go back and listen to that if that is what you are kind of working on at the moment. Now, the next thing is, how do I, oh my gosh, okay, I love this one. I was just like, okay, well, I didn't quite understand the shorthand. I write in shorthand to myself. Anyway, so if you've ever thought, oh my gosh, I hate sounding. I hate my public speaking. My public speaking coach is going to be like, yeah. So how do I sell without sounding salesy, and how do I do it without pitching to my audience all the time? First of all, probably go get a job. I'm just kidding. But what I would say to this is, if there is an element of you that feels like you're pitching all the time and you feel really salesy, this is where I would encourage you to look at your relationship with sales and even just taking or receiving money from other people, because a lot of the times this can come up. At least what I see with my female audience, or with my female clients, this typically comes up. It's not a salesy thing, it's their relationship to receiving money and like this guilt, which is why it comes across as like, oh my gosh, I don't want to sound salesy. I don't want to sound like I'm asking something from you, even though I have a business and I do have something to give you that can change your life. So this is one way, but also secondly, not all of your content is going to be buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. But unfortunately, most of the content that you see where people, are teaching you how to sell, it's very direct. It's very like, hey, I'm looking for 5 people to do this. And yeah, if every time you want to make a sale, you're doing that, you're going to sound super salesy. Or, if you're constantly posting your availabilities as a PT, as a whatever, if you have like a service based business where you run availabilities, yeah, it's going to sound awful because you're not actually creatively showcasing ways that people can work with you. And when it comes to the sales, I would say like 1 to 5% of your sales content or sell like marketing that's going to lead directly to the sale is going to be direct pitching. Even that, there's a way to do it with finesse, and it's about figuring out, okay, if you stood in front of the mirror and I gave you like, let's say 10 to 30 minutes to figure this out, where you felt really natural delivering the pitch and it feels good and you feel like aligned and stand behind that, keep practicing that and actually looking at your data and getting feedback from it, and you'll find your own rhythm for how to do it with finesse. But the second thing is, a lot of the like, when it comes to the pitch, a lot of the sale happens before the pitch. So I can't remember the exact details or the exact numbers, but I believe it was 90% of the sale happens before someone gets pitched to. And so if you do a good enough job, which for most of my clients, we want to get we want to prime your audience to the point through your messaging, through your content, where they're basically coming into your DMs like, hey, when's the earliest that we can start? How do you work with your clients? Like what's the procedure? Send me the link, contract, sign, boom, done. Versus, hey, tell me about your service. Why should I go with you? Like that's what we think sales is. And a lot of the times we rely on the pitch to carry the sale versus relying on everything that came before the pitch in order to get them over to the sale. So if you want to learn how to sell without sounding salesy all the time or constantly pitching to your audience, understand what are the buying criterias of your audience. You can figure this out by either asking your past customers or your current customers, or even people why they didn't move forward. You can sort of list out similarities in the patterns or the criteria that they would need. So understanding the psychology behind why they buy. And if you can meet their criteria by showing it in your content without selling it, or showing it in your marketing, you're not going to need to sell or sell strongly or directly. Most of the times they'll understand, like people are smart, they will understand and see, okay, I understand, how that works, and this sounds like it could work for me. And that's what we want to do. Is I like even just the way I sell versus Caleb is very different. Caleb is a lot more forward, a lot more direct. I like to be a little bit more laid back. It's also just how our businesses are different. So first of all, figure out your style of selling, and then two, figure out like what's the actual resistance. Why do you feel salesy? Is it because you're doing a lot of overcoming objections, all of that? Like there's something that's off. Figure out what's off and then go, okay, how can I use content or my marketing to overcome this, or make sure that this basically, like if it's at a 90% intensity, bring it down to like a 10% intensity. We never hate selling, because receiving money always feels good. It's just something before receiving the money that feels a bit icky. Whether that's the actual fact that you might think you're taking money from others, or it might be the fact that you feel like you're pushing them into the sale. Whatever it is, figure out what's the icky thing before receiving the money, and yeah, and then you'll figure out how to unbottleneck that. That leads us to number 6. How do you launch an offer or a new offer? So you're basically, you've decided I'm going to launch a new offer, and you think, oh my gosh, I don't want to screw this up. How do I make sure that this offer that I launch is actually going to be taken up by people, is actually going to be desired by people, and it's actually going to sell? Especially when you're launching a group thing, or it's like an event or something like that. Sometimes I know we can have that anxiety of, how am I going to sell out this event, because I don't want to have just one person show up. And then, even in that case, I'm like, you could invite your mom, your friends, give out free tickets. I don't know if you really cared about numbers. Usually it's not about the numbers, it's something about perceived rejection or perceived, judgment. Like, oh, what if people know and find out that I only got one person? But it's like, yeah. So usually it's not about the numbers, but something to do around with how your relationship to what happens when you quote unquote fail. So one, how do you make sure that the new offer you want to launch sells? Well, a few good indicators. There's demand. Instead of creating demand, look for where the demand already exists. Now, in the case of my client where, a lot of people came in and wanted advice on breakups, she could have created something really low ticket versus funneling, like, let's say a $10 thing and gotten the sales from that, versus working with them on a one-on-one capacity. So this always is going to come back to, how do you want to work with them first and foremost. If the demand isn't, let's say, something that you necessarily want to be super hands-on with, but you can help. But also, a good sign for me is you're excited, and you're excited about the offer in terms of you feel you can bring a unique twist to it and it solves a real problem. So if it ticks those three problems or ticks those three criteria, usually you're on the right track. You can of course do beta launches. You can also do like surveys, customer surveys, and ask your customers directly about it. If you've got customers, a customer list, you can send them a thing and say, hey, what problems are you seeing? But yeah, if you just ask them, what are you experiencing and what problems are coming up for you, your next offers will usually present themselves. But this is where also some people would suggest doing polls to your audience and whatnot. And I would just be very wary doing that, because people who don't, it's very easy to give free insight or input, but that input is not always insight. Yes, it's easy. Yeah, it's very easy to give free input, but that input is not always golden insight in terms of your offer. Um, you can ask your audience, hey, which one do you like better in terms of a headline, but you're not going to know because they might not be the ones buying. So, yeah, I know some people suggest to do that, which is okay. If that's what you've got in front of you, take that as one of the data points. Definitely don't rely on that being the only data point. And also, if you're a female, usually you'll be quite intuitive and be able to pick up, or even males. But I don't know a lot of males who run their business like this, except for Caleb. But you'll be able to feel what's the pulse that your audience and that the people you're serving are sort of experiencing right now. And this requires you to be actually in tune and care about your customers. Like a lot of humans, we communicate with, or actually all humans. Can I say all? Yeah, we're gonna say all. All humans communicate non-verbally as well. And so if you're genuinely invested in something, you'll be able to feel like, okay, where's what part of my audience is feeling this pain point or that pain point. So yeah, use all of those senses, use all of your senses basically to look at, okay, is this going to do well? And then sometimes there are some offers you'll launch even if it doesn't do well and you don't care. And if that's the case, go for it. Okay, if that is the case, because sometimes we do offers for ourselves, and sometimes those are actually the offers that do the best. Like I did a sales challenge back in 2024, April of 2024. It might have been March because it was Money March, March of 2024, and it led to a massive month off the back end of that. But I started that sales challenge for myself because I had not directly sold every single day, and that was one of my fears at the time, was selling something every day and coming up with new ways of selling every single day. And so I wanted to do that challenge for myself. I was excited to do it. And because I was just going through it myself, I extended the invite to my people, and it got a whole, I think we had like over 20 people, and it was insane. It was really cool. And that led to, yeah, like I said, April was one of our biggest months. But that's a story for another time. But yeah, this also comes back to how I define an offer. Sometimes an offer can be a solution to, like, an offer isn't this whole complex thing that we make it out to be. For me, I see it as a solution to a problem that's presented to people who could benefit or who might have that problem or who might want to have that solution. And sometimes it can have the whole shebang, emails, sales page, all of that. But sometimes, I think like last year for the sales challenge, it was literally just a post, and then people DM me. I told them the info and they were like, yep, cool, sign me up. Boom, paid. That was that. So, hope that made sense. Going into, I'm conscious of time, going into number 7. Okay, we've already done this. Yeah. Going to number 7. If you went viral tomorrow and you had a bunch of people in your DM say, I would love to do this thing that you have on offer, but I've done something similar and it hasn't worked before. And your immediate answer is, oh, don't worry, we do things different to this person, or oh, don't worry, the plan is personalized to you. This tells me that you don't have a clear differentiation from your competitors, because a personalized plan and we do things different is not a differentiator. You actually want to understand, this goes back to understanding your customers. What are the things that they've already tried and hasn't worked for them? Now, I want to make a caveat, because this is why it's so important to know exactly who you want to serve, not just all the people that you could serve, like everyone with a heartbeat and a credit card, or like a card or money in the bank. But you want to know the specific types of people who tried the things and it hasn't worked for them and they're super frustrated, even though that thing was meant to work for other people like them. So I'm thinking about some clients who did a basketball program, and some of their clients, like a lot of their clients, came from a community run by like an ex-athlete, and they were just given generic plans. Now, in this case, a lot of their messaging was targeted around, the PDF you download or the YouTube workout that you watch that's got millions of views is not going to help you perform better. That is why our plan looks at X, Y, and Z. Our service looks at X, Y, and Z. And so it specifically spoke to why what they've tried didn't work, and they were able to pinpoint, okay, because they did this, they experienced this as a result: injuries. They also didn't have clear progression, and so they started stalling. All of this stuff they were able to pinpoint and say, and this is exactly why we do this in our offer, and this in our offer, and this in our offer. So knowing exactly, now if they had just going back to what I was saying before, if they had just said we work with anyone who wants to achieve this outcome, they wouldn't be able to pinpoint those exact things, which means that they wouldn't have been able to capture that audience. And so you need to know what are the things that your audience has already tried that hasn't worked for them, and why it hasn't worked, and why your offer is the solution. And that's how you will answer that. So the next time someone asks you that, please do not answer. Please do not type back, we do things differently to this person because of the, no, 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 no. Okay, know your differentiator, because different is not always better, and that's the truth. So number 8. Oh, okay, yes, this is a good one. So you might have noticed this: buyers and buying behavior has changed, and I want you to take notes on this, because over the past few years we've had it on easy mode. In early 2024 going into mid 2024, we kind of went into hard mode a little bit, in terms of, if you don't actually know what you're doing with marketing, it's been hard mode for you. And the reason for this is because with AI, with the abundance of information out there, it's super easy to rack up sales, because like I said, people love to hoard information and feel like they're making a change. But understand that people who follow you and view your content aren't necessarily going to buy the thing. And it ties back to everything that we're talking about today. You can kind of see like all fit together. But this specifically is when you know that there are people who could be a perfect fit for what you do, but they're not buying. Right? So you've got a ton of people who are like, oh, this is exactly what I needed today. And the messaging was on point, and you were talking about the offer and the problem that you solve, but they're not buying. A lot of the times it's because, going back to, I think it was I believe it might have been number 5, but it was the one where I talked about how there's buying criteria, or things that, like a checklist that people need to have ticked in order to make a buying decision. It's usually because even though something resonates with them, your offer hasn't met all of those other check boxes in their list. So we all like to make mental lists and go tick, 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 tick. Yes, I'm going to buy that. Whether that's a conscious decision, unconscious, but this goes back to, you need to understand what are all the things that could possibly get them to say no, that need, and then your things need to be strong enough that those no's won't stand in the way of them saying yes. And so a lot of the times you ask your people, why did you buy? Why did you buy from us? And even asking people, why didn't you buy from us? That kind of stuff. So you need to care more about what's going on in the mind of your buyer, a lot more than just what they're doing with their actions, which is, commenting, liking, saving, all of that stuff, even like sending you DMs. You need to make sure that you're reading the true signals, or picking up on the true signals that indicate sales intent or not, and then figure out why they're not moving forward, versus just followers and whatnot, which might have mattered a couple of years back, but even then, it was just more obvious because it was less convoluted. But yeah, that is what I would say. If you've got a lot of followers and you've got people lurking around who could be a great fit, take a deep dive into their psyche. Number 9, actually, I might leave number 9 and number 10 because they're kind of similar. I'm gonna leave them too, because number 9 was about you're comparing yourself to creators and businesses of different business models, but I feel like that could be an entire video and talk about different business models and my business model and why I chose it and why you might choose the other business models. And then the 10th one is, your offer didn't flop, you just sold it to the wrong people, which kind of comes back to the audience that you've built, understanding them, like what's the gap, and then also what to do in that case, which is like kind of a decision tree. And yeah, come back for part 2. My phone might die, and I promise I will get this up, so I'm like 8 out of 10. But come back for part 2. I'm gonna film specific ones answering those 2 questions, talking about, okay, like what happens when your offer flops and how to figure out if it's the fact that you sold it to the wrong people or that you've got the wrong offer. um Either case, you've got the wrong offer, but it's about figuring out if it's your audience problem or if it's a positioning problem. And then I will do, like, I spend a good part of that video breaking down different business models. If you would like that, make sure to let me know in the comments. I'm going to do it anyway, but it's just good dopamine, all of that good stuff. If this was helpful, let me know which one you're going to work on as well. And if you have any questions about what I just went through, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram, and I will catch you on the flippity flip.